as soon as I could buy records, I was fascinated by the sound of the needle in the groove, the look of the label as it went round, the sounds that came out. I think that I always had an ear for musical textures. So one of my earliest fascinations, for example, was late 60s reggae. You could always hear the tape hiss when the needle came down on the record. It was almost like receiving sort of news from another planet. I used to do a paper round, and to keep myself going, I used to imagine music in my head. And this was stuff that was complete with arrangement, orchestration, rhythm sections. The whole thing in my head was arranged. It was a complete musical whole. I began to realise that some of the stuff I was hearing on my paper round wasn't on the radio. And I gradually began to think, well, so did I make that up then? And gradually it occurred to me that I did. My experience is that once you've written something that it's pretty much what you wanted to say, then you have to let it go and trust that if you have anything original to say, that it will shine through.
Brian Wiltshire is an English composer and percussionist. Although his music has been performed throughout the UK and Europe, particularly by young English artists such as the Elysian Quartet and percussionist Owen Gunnell, these new releases on Lubarev are the first commercial recordings of his music.
Machine Stops was my first post-minimalist piece, really. It has more of a dramatic structure than previous pieces. There's more of a sense of conflict in there, much more use of dynamics, but it's still neat. Most composers in the history of concert music have themselves as musicians played either bowed strings or keyboards, or both. Very few other instruments. I believe Berlioz was a guitarist, for example, but I think he's very much the exception until you get to the late 20th century and people like Steve Reich, for example. Steve Reich has been a hugely important influence in this respect. He's changed a lot of people's minds about drums, drumming, drummers, what we do, whether we can write music, the nature of the music that we write, etc. And I've been hugely grateful for his influence, and I think it's much easier for me to now talk to people, introduce my music to people, play them stuff, than it would have been if there now wasn't this awareness in the concert music world that, hey, the drummers have arrived. It's our turn now. We're now presenting our notions of what concert music can be. And my kind of theory on this is that a drummer's notion of what concert music can be is going to be different from a violinist's or a pianist's. And that to me is what's new and exciting, and I think that these days it's probably the drummers and the guitarists who are pushing concert music. The Golden Snake is a Chinese folk tune that I really liked when I heard it, so I wrote a set of variations on it. There are some Chinese elements in terms of obviously the pentatonic scale, quite a few gongs in there, and it works its way back to where it started, and it really varies the folk tune quite a lot. It stretches out quite a lot and contracts quite a lot, and there's quite a lot of use of canon or imitation.
Classifying Wilshire's music is a challenge. His music can be variously associated with postmodernism, new simplicity, post-minimalism, and the new tonal movement, without ever fully belonging to any one tendency.
Post-university, I basically for a while turned my back on concert music. I involved myself in musics which I felt had a sense of immediacy, or which involved improvisation, or that didn't use notation. So I spent several years just plunging into the world of rock bands, jazz bands, samba, African drumming, gamelan. I felt that I wanted to re-establish contact with the music of the ear. So I went through that sort of period, and then I decided after that to try to just bring some of what I'd learnt back into concert music. The question was how to do it, and there weren't all that many models. When I presented gamelan sketches at the Fairfield Hall in Croydon some years ago with a group of young percussionists that I was running at the time, the biggest compliment I had was from the parent of one of the students, who I knew to be an aficionado of pretty standard concert music, which is mostly driven by bowed strings and keyboards. And he was very keen to tell me, well, that sounded like real music. I had the sense that he felt that because he was looking at a stage full of percussion instruments, that he would be witnessing something like a vaudeville act, which could be approved of as performance art or a spectacle, but which wouldn't impinge on his notions of real music as being music which was driven by bowed strings and keyboards. Now, that for me was very nice to receive, because it meant that I'd managed to communicate with a fan of traditional concert music on that territory, and it meant that I'd held my own. To me, the purpose of music is to give the listener a space in which their mind can float freely. My experience as a concert goer is that gives your brain a completely free, uncluttered space. I cannot think of any other human experience that does that. But I think that having that mental space that music opens up is something that is, I would say, essential to having a well-rounded experience of what it's like to be a human being.